elementary teacher, I see it definitely. I'm sure you see it, Joy. You have them when they're in first grade and they're loving learning, and then they leave in fifth or sixth grade, and we've kind of drilled it out of them.
So enthusiastic.
Yeah, exactly. So it was interesting. I want to start talking about like the definition of innovation, because I think they had so many different, or he had so many definitions. What was the one that resonated with you guys? Do you remember?
For me, yeah, it was creative problem solving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, the other ones, I'm looking at it from a school perspective.
Mm-hmm.
The other ones, because in business, I think innovation can mean many things, and they talked about the process of making something new, and that, and you know, in my class, I do want kids to try to make something new, but I also realize that they're not there yet, and you know, for them, it's more of copying and trying to remix something basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I really like the idea of just creative problem solving.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the idea that it has to improve something and make it better. It's not just having a great new idea if there's no purpose to it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, like she said, I think she said real needs and creating a bridge to the solution. Because I remember at one of the grades, they do an invention convention, and kids are like inventing things that really doesn't add any extra, you know, function to it. It just looks cool, or it's something different. So kind of really focusing on it has to be a real need and change the product or whatever it is to make it better. So yeah. I like that definition too, the creative problem solving, because I think something as teachers that we can do is kind of facilitate that and guide them. Whereas some of the other ones were more kind of step by step, giving you, I don't know what I'm trying to say. Like it wasn't as open. I think creative problem solving is very open for people to take what they want from that and make it fit. So, yeah. I also liked, did you guys watch any of the videos? Did you get to watch those?
No.
Yes.
Yeah. Because I didn't, on my Kindle, it wasn't working, or on my iPad, I was reading it electronically, but then I went to the site and they actually have the videos there. And there was a woman, Neil, I forget her first name, but she said it's a non-traditional solution to a traditional problem, innovation. So I like that too, getting them to think outside the box. So, yeah. And then he brought up the whole thing about incremental innovation versus disruptive and transformative. And coming from what you said, Thomas, like looking at it from a school perspective, I think this education has always been like incremental, where I think now it's very apparent that we need some disruptive and transformative innovations within education systems. So have you guys experienced any of those, or are your schools doing disruptive innovation in school?
Actually, one of the things that attracted me to the school I'm at now is that there's a small group of educators called the Tech Ambassadors, who get together every week or every other week and just meet and talk and share lessons and ask for feedback basically. And then within that there's something called Unplugged, where once a month we get together and we talk about an article or something. And I mean, that's not really innovation, but that's what we got.
Well, it's laying the groundwork for it, right? Because you're able to experiment and get feedback and read articles. So,
yeah.
I think
oh, go ahead, Joy. Sorry.
I think you always have to be careful that if we have disruptive innovation, there's not too much disruptive innovation all at once with too many new ideas, because it takes time. So I think the combination of the incremental and here's the disruptive, and we'll focus on it for a while before we have another disruptive one, is good, so that people actually have time to understand what's involved.
Yeah. And I think making it authentic to, fit your school's mission or within your learning objectives if you're a teacher. Because we have a new head that came in, and he's doing, I think, a marvelous job because he's really not starting the disruptive yet, but he's kind of planting seeds in people's minds. And he really is into design thinking and maker spaces. So I think it's in the future, it'll pan out where that will happen, but he's not forcing it down people's throats, but he's kind of introducing it and letting people marinate on it for a little while. So I'm excited to see where that goes.
That sounds exciting. A good way of working.
Yeah. And it's broad enough that design thinking and maker spaces could fit, kindergarten up through 12th grade. It's just you adapt them for what you need within the grade levels. So I'm excited. We're redesigning our whole library, and we're going to call it the commons area rather than a library. So yeah, there's some cool things happening. So
Cool.
yeah. What do you think about the survival skills that he talked about the 7 ones, but then he kept introducing other little pieces that you have to be an innovator?
I really liked the ones that
He wrote his previous book on the 7 skills, and this time he felt he needed to add to it, which is interesting. So we've, so now we've got the creative thinking skills and the motivation and the expertise. Is that what you're thinking about?
Yeah, how they all come, the diagram that he had, kind of the triple Venn diagram. So yeah. And just the different things all the different experts he asked about, well, what do you look for in somebody that's innovative? And I liked the lady from Google, her name is Judy something, I forget her last name, but she said they want people to have intellectual curiosity, take control of the situation versus just standing around waiting to be led, and then collaborate. And I liked what she said about collaborate, ability to recognize and learn from people around you. So I think, and now going back to the school, because we always want to tie it back to education and what we're doing in our schools, I'm thinking how do we instill that intellectual curiosity and the ability to be a problem solver and collaboration, and because those aren't concrete skills that you're teaching. So
I think example that we got from Kirk's upbringing of how he was given lots of free time to play outside, and the expectation that he should read for an hour but not told what to read. I think those are things we can take and think about. How much unstructured time do we give our students?
Yeah.
Time
not a lot.
Not a lot. How much do we give them freedom to read and time to read without telling them what to read? I know a lot do dear time more, but
well, and even within the confines of the classroom is giving them the choice you're going to learn, XYZ, but you get to pick how you do it. So having that autonomy to make the choice and learn themselves as learners, who they are. So I think that's really important to do, but it's kind of a mind shift for a lot of educators, because that's not how we grew up, nor it's really hard, I think, for people to let go of that control and let the students kind of have the control and be able to make the choices. And if they fail, that's okay. They fail, and we help them and figure out why and kind of reflect on their process. So,
and if you go back to, again, Kurt spending a lot of time outside, nobody was there monitoring his progress. He probably felt, if you were watching, well, it may have been difficult to see the skills he was developing at the time. It's only afterwards I'm aware. And again, that's an interesting way of thinking. Do they need to achieve immediately, even if it's free play? Are we supporting them, or are we giving them time without that expectation that we see what they've done?
Yeah, and it is tricky because his parents definitely were involved in his life, but not in the helicopter way. They were more involved in the way that they empowered him, just like his teacher at Stanford did. They empowered him to take risks and learn from them and learn who he was as a learner. And if it wasn't fitting, like he had a very good head on his shoulders. I think then they trusted him in his decisions, like when he wanted to leave high school early and Stanford early. Not many parents would do that, but I think because they saw him develop all through his formative years and see the choices he was making, they were able to support him and trust him. But it's like, I think the view that they were taking was a long-term view rather than like, okay, he met this milestone. He wasn't as forced to fit into the developmental stages that I would think other kids were. So his parents had the ultimate goal of where they wanted him to be, but the path that he took was a little more lenient and free. So and then I'm wondering, how do we do that in education? Like I always keep going back. I see that in the parenting point of view because they don't have the constraints and stuff that we do in education systems. So how do we transfer what they're doing at home to what we do at school?
It's that feeling of, do we trust the students? Do we trust them to go and work alone in the corridor or in another space? Do we trust them to make decisions if they feel that something is more important to work on than we feel? Do we trust them with that, or do we have to get the curriculum done? It's I love his idea of a buffet of opportunities. I think it's be offering many opportunities for children to take from. That's a nice idea.
I love that because I grew up, I played sports and stuff, and I think that my parents, they did that. Like I played, 6 sports at a time, and they didn't make me focus on one, which nowadays I hear from like my brother with his kids, and they're saying like parents are making their kid pick one sport when they're 7 years old, and that's how they're going to get a college scholarship. And it's so sad to me because it's just like Kirk's dad did, it's like you want them to experience everything and then make their decision. They don't know when they're 7 years old what they want to do. And so giving them the opportunity to kind of do little taste tests and see, oh, I like this, or I don't like it. But yeah, I liked that.
In the early years, we could even look at that in terms of resources. So for construction materials, do we only give Lego, or do we provide a whole variety of materials that some children find they work better with than others?
And just like that's one little change, but it's opening up a bunch of different doors, so I think of it, I taught in 5th grade. So in 5th grade, I would always give my kids I would give them the learning objective and what they had to show me they knew how to learn, or that they learned, and then they picked the way that they showed it. And well, that's not super innovative or anything, but it did give them the choice to experiment with their learning style and what am I good at, what am I not good at. And then when I saw kids doing the same thing over and over again, I'd say, okay, I want you to try something different than making a Prezi or making a video. I want you to do something that makes you talk in front of people because they didn't want to talk in front, so trying to, as a teacher, figure out what are the strengths and weaknesses of your students and kind of help them enhance the strengths but develop the weaknesses. So
I think that's important because sometimes there's a feeling, well, we'll let them do what they're good at, but we don't support the weaknesses and encourage those. So
because it's easy when you see them doing well at something, you're like, oh yeah, they're doing awesome. That's okay, they got my help on that. So but then you kind of forget there's a whole nother kind of facet that they maybe not be approaching, and it might be on purpose or it might just be that they're not gravitating towards that, and we kind of have to help them along the way. So
sounds good.
I liked the Apple always the think different, but then I like how, I don't know if he added or somebody said you have to act differently to think differently, and how by acting differently is trying a million different things. Or I loved how his dad took him out of his neighborhood and put him in a soccer league that was in the Spanish neighborhood. So he was exposed to a different language and different types of kids. And I thought that was great because it's not something I would have thought to do, but I think it added a whole nother dimension to his soccer experience rather than just getting a traditional, suburban soccer league.
Yes, although again, how do you replicate that in school?
Exactly.
When this is what we've got, how do you find other experiences for them? I mean, there are ways, but
yeah, I think it's really important to build, like we learned in, I think it was the first class in Coattail, we learned about PLNs, but I mean, taking PLNs from the digital world, but also building a network around your community and your school community. Because I think of our school where we are, and then we have immediately around us, we have, they call it favelas here. It's a very poor neighborhood. And like, what a great opportunity we have. So we need to foster that relationship, and then, maybe bring them in, or we do something with it. And there's that exchange going on. But yeah, it's hard to take what the parents did, exactly what I was saying before, and then put it into education, like, because they had unlimited resources and the freedom to make their own decisions. But no.
It looks like Catherine's joining us.
Yay.
Hello.
Hi,
Finally
Catherine.
made it in.
Yay, welcome. Can you see us? Welcome. Hey.
Hi.
How are you? Can you hear us?
Can you hear it?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear
Yes.
you now. Great.
Okay, great. Hi.
Hi, welcome. We were just kind of talking about the qualities or the kind of the skills of innovators, and then we led into talking about Kirk and his parents. So
Right. I'll listen for a
Yeah.
moment and catch up.
yeah, we were just Thomas was here. I think he's kind of popping in and out. I think probably maybe the internet. So another one that I loved, and I don't know if I loved it so much because our school's really focusing on it right now, but when they were talking about design thinkers and how design thinkers need to have empathy, to the human side of it, like yes, this might be a problem, or how does it impact humans? And I loved that, because in our elementary school we're doing a social emotional curriculum right now, and we're really focusing on empathy. So to see empathy come up in the design thinkers, I loved it. I was like, yay!
I agree. It brings a human side to the whole, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it's something that doesn't get brought up often enough when we're talking about sort of innovation, when we're talking about creativity in the classroom and things like that. We often leave out the fact that empathy is so critical to the process of making things that will affect people.
For sure. Yeah. The empathy is just, to me, it actually, I think, starts with empathy. Like, what's this problem? How are people feeling with it? And then how can I make them, their feelings change or make their lives easier? But I really loved the empathy part, and that they included that. So, yeah. I'm trying to... Hey, Thomas, you're back. Yay.
Yeah.
I said it's probably the internet in China. I remember we lived in China and would always go in and out, in and out. So, yeah. Yeah. We were just talking about, because I think you fell out too, Thomas, in that. We were talking about the how in Google they value intellectual curiosity and taking control of the situation and collaboration. And we're talking about how to do that within schools, though. Like, how do you, like Kirk's dad was able to take him and put him in a soccer league in the Spanish neighborhood. But how do we, within the confines of school, encourage students to kind of step out of their comfort zones? So.
I think one way to do that is by connecting classrooms. It's not the same, but at least that's what a few teachers here are doing.
Yeah. Yeah. We were talking about, digitally connecting classrooms, but then also building that community around your schools to face. But that's, I think, challenging, because that's another if the language isn't the same or just different confines, but definitely an option. So,
Yeah.
What did you think about oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, last year I was doing an exhibition with my fifth grade class, and a couple of them were doing like refugees and migration, and they were really focusing wonderfully on the big issue. But we kept trying to push them to make connections with the community, because the zoo was quite a big migrant population. There's a lot of refugee support happening. And they just didn't see that. So I think this really sort of what's in the community, how can we make those links, how can we get the kids to recognize that those are just as important as sort of going off to Geneva to visit the
Yeah.
And
I think it comes, yeah. I think there's a balance between home and school, and like really in the elementary school, at least, building that partnership, because our third graders are about to start a unit on children's rights around the world, and the teachers did a pre-assessment, and they were completely clueless that not all kids got to go to school, that not all kids had like dinner and safe water to drink, and so like making that, I think Kirk had very aware parents, and they were aware of their like the wealth that they had and the opportunities that they had, and so they used them and exposed their kids to a variety of things, but they also used it to learn from. And so at our school, of course, and I think a lot of international schools, you have very wealthy families or very well-to-do families. So I think it's also working with the parents to help build that empathy, and not everyone's like us. So, but it's a hard, delicate thing to do.
Yeah, it's really interesting. In a lot of international schools, you've got a lot of diversity, which in some ways does build those connections in ways that a local community school might not have the population for. But at the same time, it is, like you say, such a privileged culture, such a privileged group of diverse backgrounds.
Yeah. I will say, because he was talking, I mean, I know America has a lot of issues to fix in its education, but I feel like when I worked in the States, my husband worked at a very well-to-do school, but those kids were, the innovation generation that he was talking about, and they totally were they were very privileged, like their parents were Hollywood doctors and but they were really focused on how do we help others with what we've been given. So I think that America does have the empathy part down, or most people, I should say. But it's like tapping into that and getting them to explore it more. So, yeah. I have a lot of notes, so I'm trying to go through them. Does anyone else have anything to add about anything? Because I'm like...
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, going back to the parents, they had expectations that the children would do well. And again, that's something we can bring back to school, that we will expect the children to do well and to respond. And I think those expectations are huge. Whatever materially wealth you have or you haven't, it helps. I think as teachers, if we expect the children to do well, they respond.
For sure. I think it goes back to the love of learning and the curiosity. I just posted an article on Twitter about this mom. She's like, I'm not worried about my daughter's grades. She's doing fine, but I'm worried about her. She's lost the love of learning. And the teacher was like, the balance of telling the truth. Yes, we've beat it out of her. And then also like calming the mom down. It's a really interesting article because it speaks directly to, I think, what Tony Wagner was talking about in his book about kind of that education system that we've set up is setting the kids up to leave their curiosity and their innovation and all that behind. So, but yeah. I want to get back to, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I found the section about Apple itself as a company really interesting because I'm one of the Apple Distinguished Educators, and I went to the Institute thing a couple of years ago. And one of the best parts of the week with all these amazing teachers was that they set aside a room and they just called it the playground. And they had all of these amazing, technology toys, other things that you could do, makerspace, etc. And they just set it up and they said, have fun. And the things that were coming out of there really does remind you of the importance of play. Really
Yeah. Yeah, I think he referred to Dave Pinkney's book, Drive. I read that, and it goes back to, yeah, it goes back to intrinsic motivation, right? And like, if you have the opportunity to play and the autonomy to build something you want, or the like to build or develop, because Google does that. They do like the 20% of their work week, they get to work on their own individual projects. So I think the play is huge.
Projects that come out of that is fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is why we're speaking.
Approach, which I don't know. I haven't read the rest of the book yet, so we may be talking about that later. But their idea for those 20% projects, trach it. You're trying to sort of find the ways that it will fail, and you don't get punished for failure. You get rewarded for finding the ways it will fail, so that other people can potentially find a way to fix what you've broken.
So like touches on the collaborative.
Yeah.
Yeah, the collaborative failure. That's one thing we're working on in our school. It's actually one of our leadership team's goals, is to celebrate failure. So when he talked about design thinking and having the perseverance and taking risks and tolerance for failure, I was like, yay, because we are implementing a lot of new programs with our teachers, and because teachers are very, we're all very perfectionists and we want it to be the best. So they're sometimes not honest with, oh, I did this lesson and it totally stunk today, or what do I need to work on for this? And so we're celebrating failures and like in front of them. Like when I make a mistake or I do something and it fails, I'll talk about it and then what I learned from it. And so we're trying to do that with our teachers and hope it trickles down into the classroom. So we'll see.
I actually love that idea. I was thinking, what can I do with my class to get away from that? Oh no, it didn't work. I don't want to try it again.
There's a short little video. I'll try to send it to you. It's by the creator of Spanx. Thomas, you might not know what Spanx are, but they're like do you know what they are? They're like women wear them under their dresses, so it makes your body like look, shapely and stuff like that. Well, she created Spanx, and she talked about her upbringing, which then I was kind of like relating to Kurt, because her dad, every day they came home at dinner and they shared something that they failed at. And then they didn't call it they called it a oops moment. And she said, you want to have oops moments because that's what you're learning from. If you don't have them, then you're not going to learn. So we showed that to our staff, and then we kind of do a little video about failing every professional development. So,
well, and then that kind of ties into sharing how you failed, because then if you're sharing failures, you're letting other teachers avoid those same failures.
For sure. And it's like, I forget, I'm not as eloquent as the woman that was the CEO, but she was saying exactly that. Like, they have in their staff meetings, and they could be like a little whoops, or they could be like a huge whoops that actually ended up to a new product. So, but I think our students are it's ingrained in them that failure is a horrible thing, and that if I fail at this, then I'm no good at this subject, or I'm not good at presenting because I did a presentation and it was really bad, or blah, blah, blah. So I think it's not only teaching about it's okay to fail, but like, how can we learn from this, and to be metacognitive about what did I do and what could I do better, or what did I do that maybe would have worked in a different situation, but I didn't think about my audience. So it's just having the awareness.
That you have that reflection moment in it, and, well, what would I do differently? Because without that, then it just becomes, let's fail.
Exactly.
What have I done? What went wrong? And what do we learn? What will I do differently? Then that's the celebration, because I've learned something.
Yeah. And like keeping track, like the relationships that you have with your students, and like knowing, oh, this kid failed at this last time, but they just did this and they actually improved upon it. So kind of highlighting it, saying, I noticed how you, but
yeah, I think that improvement is really one of the critical pieces that's not often given time and focus, maybe. Because I know in at least my school, at our grade level, a lot of the kids are okay with the idea that it's not as good as they planned it to be when they build something or create something. but they really struggle with that sort of reflecting on where it failed, what went wrong, and let's go back and fix it, or let's change it, or let's make it better, and go through another iteration process. And I think a lot of that is we don't give them the time to do it.
Yeah, we got to fit everything in the curriculum.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think honestly, because I'm coming at it a different perspective, like looking from the admin, I see that with teachers too, though. Like they'll have a lesson and it will go horrible. We all have those lessons. You're like, oh, I lost the kids, you know, but it's point. Where was it that they lost them? Or what was it that I could have done differently? Or how could, do you know, they come, because it's things within the day. So it's getting teachers to stop and think about the decisions they're making and to be very intentional about them. And I think that if we could do that with our teachers, then it will, again, trickle down to the students. So, but it's a process. So, like anything. I liked, it was the very beginning, going back to chapter 1, where he was talking about this innovation generation and kind of how they're learning more outside of school than they are in school, because they go on the internet and they can, you know, Google anything they want, and how they have this distrust for schools, he said, and it kind of made me sad, but I understand where they're coming from, because they are this generation that they're having to sit up in front and listen to the teacher, but when they could be learning exactly what the teacher's saying by themselves at their own level. And so it just was really interesting to me. So I remember in the first, I think it was the first coattail course about the messing around and playing around and how we tell kids stop doing that. But that's really not what we should be doing. We should say, keep doing it. Yay. Keep doing it. And then let me help you go further. So
that's one of the ones. Oh, sorry, Joy. Go ahead.
No, it's good.
I was going to say that's one of the ones that really struck me as different in different schools, because I've taught in, let's say, state systems, for example, where it's very much that regimental curriculum. They're sitting, they're learning, they're doing worksheets, things like that. And now that I'm in a much more sort of project-focused, creative-focused school, I was trying to think of any time where the kids have just had to sit and listen. And it's like, well, no, they're on their technology, they're playing, they're creating, they're doing projects. And at the moment, we're doing this materials unit. So they've been building stuff. They've been pulling in recycled materials and making towers. They've been taking it out into the environment. We went to a cable car station and you got to see how the cable cars were built and things like that. And they got to pick stuff up and treat it like Lego. And it's just, again, that example of we're in a very privileged space, I think, because we've got not only the time, but the program that allows for that creativity, because we're not trusting kids to death.
I think we still have to teach those listening skills, but often it's listening to other students. So if they've found a solution to a maths problem, we want them to share and explain how they've done it. That still involves the listening from other students, but it's slightly different because it's peer teaching.
But it's also communicating and learning how to put their own process into words.
Yes.
Which is very, very hard for especially and for adults.
Very hard. I mean, I think it's hard even up to high schoolers. My husband teaches HL math, and it's really hard for the students to be able, they know the math, but it's the communication piece of explaining what they know or connecting it to other things for their IAs and different things like that. So a lot of what my husband does in class, I mean, of course it's the math, but then he teaches them the communication piece and how everyone knows the math. When you get out in the real world, that won't set you apart. What will set you apart is the communication and being able to get your ideas across an eloquent way where people will buy into them. And I mean, he gets a lot of fight from the kids because, oh, this isn't math, this isn't math. But then, 3 years down the road when they're in college, they'll write him and be like, thank you. So I think sometimes the students don't even know what they need at that moment. It's us as educators that need to kind of open the doors to the horizon. So Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
goes back.
Go ahead. Sorry.
It goes back to what a school is there to teach. Are we there to teach the knowledge, or are we there to teach skills?
Mm-hmm.
And I think obviously in the PYP curriculum especially, it's explicitly said, knowledge is one of the teaching skills are really critical. And it's just keeping our focus on that we're teaching the communication, we're teaching the listening skills, we're teaching the research, the attribution, we're teaching all of these different pieces. And the kids can find the information themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's because we were talking about the Venn diagram and the innovation in the middle, and then in the second chapter he introduces, I don't know if you guys can see it, with the round, like the culture of teamwork, problem solving, and so that's what you're teaching. All those are within the kind of the outline for teaching the expertise and the creative thinking skills, the motivation. So, yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those are very important. The culture that it's based in.
Mm-hmm. So Thomas, you went in a huge difference in the culture of like both the schools and the teachers, how they approach the learning. Did you hear me?
Sorry?
I was saying you went from first and second grade to middle school. Are you seeing a different approach from the culture perspective, like the culture of the teachers and the school, middle school?
Yeah, it was a interesting jump because I changed countries, changed positions, and changed cultures. So yeah, it's a lot different. And being in early elementary, the kids are very free, I guess. But now I'm in early high school, so the kids are very focused on grades, very focused on being right all the time. And that's a challenge to get that out of them.
Yeah. I wonder when that, I mean, I know they've done studies that when that age is where they switch to like, I have to be right. Because I used to teach fifth grade and they were still, in my opinion, my kids were still like willing to be wrong and take the risk. But I'm wondering when that, the change to the dark side happens.
I think it's also personality.
True.
Because some children, even at a young age, they need to be right and they can't cope with getting it wrong.
Yeah, there's always those few in the class that it's going to be an issue. They always have to get something right, and they're the perfectionists. And I used to have one who have a complete meltdown, like he refused to do any art in class because he didn't think he was good at art, so he wouldn't even put pencil to paper. And this continued, he was a perfectionist in every area, but in the areas he was good at, that didn't matter because he knew he would get it right. But then obviously I started giving him the more challenging work, stuff that really tested his thinking and tested his creativity, and there was no one right answer, and he'd say he couldn't do it, and he'd go back to the stuff that was too easy for him. And it really is just sort of that personality piece, along with, I think, the culture of the school, culture of the classroom.
Mm-hmm. It's like nurture versus nature.
Although often that drive to be perfect is what drives innovation, because you see it's not perfect and you find a way to change it to make it better. So it's got positives as well.
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at our school system, and I forget what course it was, but it was saying, confines breeds creativity. So like I agree with you, Catherine, that international schools have a lot more freedom and flexibility as far as their resources and the pacing of the curriculum and different aspects. But I think that when your school does have confines, it's like that forces you to be creative and get around them. So use technology, but even if you don't have it, so it makes you be a problem solver, even if you aren't naturally a problem solver. So, yeah. I was trying to pull up the quote that, of course, I didn't write down. Sorry. I'm like, I want to be Kirk's parents' kids. I want them to be my parents. Yeah. How about his teacher? What did you guys think about his teacher at Stanford?
I thought that was awesome. Like, just, and it goes back to that confines and creativity. He was talking about how the restrictions made the projects better, because then the kids were working on how to get around the restrictions as much as anything else. And that Greenpeace group that he was talking about that went above and beyond in order to fail the assignment because they didn't want to, what was it, catching frogs or something?
Yeah.
And it really was sort of, oh yeah, they wouldn't have done that if they hadn't been given restrictions in the first place.
Yeah. I think I loved how he went back to like, oh, there has to be a part of whimsy in it, and like going back to kind of the early education of having play-based learning and something that's what kids gravitate towards. And all, I mean, we're all a little bit of kids inside of us, so we're all going to gravitate towards having that whimsical thing within the project. So I liked that a lot.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Yeah, empowerment and whimsy, he said. You know, and then he empowered his students. He was doing two things: teaching them the skills by giving them experience in solving progressively more complex problems, and developing their self-confidence. So I think that's a huge part too, the self-confidence. So.
But you got the impression he did it because he loved it.
Oh, for sure.
If that's something we can all take into a classroom, I think the children respond.
Yeah.
And I think explicitly, the success comes from whether you call it passion or drive, or use other words, the word that I'm blanking on right now, but really sort of doing what you love doing makes you willing to take those risks, to fail, and to keep on going, and to persevere.
Yeah. And having the support system, I think, because you could be a teacher that loves to like teach or loves a certain content, but if you don't have an administration that supports you in failure and helping you grow and build that self-confidence, then it's not going to, it'll either not be a right fit, so you'll end up leaving, or you will be, you know, beaten down where you won't want to do that anymore. So I think it goes back to that system that you're within. So, yeah. It's building the growth mindset of like, you can do it even if you fail. And so I had
the mindset is everywhere these days in all the articles.
Yeah, for sure. It is. It's everywhere, but then also it's really hard to apply, like to teach it and to. I'm reading the book right now, the actual and it's, what's the name of it? And there's parts where I'm like, I don't know if I agree with this. It's called Mindset, the New Philosophy of Success. It's not really new. I know it's an old book, but but there are parts where I'm like, I don't know if I agree with it, but I do. But it's like, that's not what I was taught. So I have to relearn, like unlearn what I learned and then relearn this. So it's a challenge for me sometimes. So anything else that you guys were like totally drew you in, or you really thought like, wow, this is something we're doing at my school, or something we need to improve on, or?
I think it just reminded me of last year. We started off doing passion projects or genius hour or whatever you want to call it in a more formalized way as a team, because I've done them in my classroom every year for years. And a couple of other teachers in the school have done it as well. And then we've now started, just as a grade 5 team, we're all going to do this leading up to exhibition. And we just found that every cycle, because we did it in sort of a 3 or 4 week cycle, and every time they decided on what they wanted to do, they did their research, or they presented, or they built something, and they brought it in to share. The first one was pretty shoddy. It was actually terrible. The second time around, they improved on it, and they were thinking, you know, they might do a completely different area of interest, but the whole thing would be better. The third time around was fantastic. And then they brought all that learning in and they applied it to exhibition. And the exhibition itself was so much better because they'd had those chances without any pressure, without any need to, you're presenting it to the whole school, the whole community. This is a big deal. These were just, 3-week have fun units.
Mm-hmm.
And they loved it. They applied everything that they learned through that to this big pressure-filled exhibition. And Joy, you came around to the exhibition last year. You know exactly how pressure-filled it is at our school.
Yes.
And I think it just prepared them a lot better. So building in those small pieces in order to build that confidence and build those, what was it that they called it when he's talking about the project, like building up those skills and building up that confidence before you get to the big project.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's just like us as adults, right? We don't ever do a project or complete a report and just that's the only time we've done it. We've had years and years of practice and opportunities for failure and growth. And so I think so often we're so stuck to the curriculum, or I have so much to do, I don't have time to take out this little bit of time to work on this. But it kind of has reopened my eyes to like, yeah, you might not have the time, but if you fit the time in, then the learning will be so much more, or it will be greater than it is, or it currently is, So it's like rearranging and working within the confines that you have to make the time.
Yeah, and I think it also develops the ability to cope with failure. If you never fail until you're an adult and then you fail, it's very difficult. But I think if you give children opportunity to fail as part of everyday life and help them find ways to move on, they take that as just normal and they persevere when things are tough.
So. For sure. I think in society today, it's so like parents don't want their kids to fail and no, it's going to hurt their self-esteem, when in actuality, instead of hurting their self-esteem, it helps it because they realize, I failed, but I grew and I overcame this challenge. So I think our approach to it is a little bit skewed, or parents' approach to it maybe.
And I think that comes back to a lot of what I've been reading lately about the language we use in the classroom and the language parents use with kids. And if you're celebrating how wonderful they are all the time and really focusing on, well, okay, this was really good. That was brilliant, even when the whole thing was not great at all. You have to acknowledge that, well, no, actually, that you could have done better. How are you going to do it better next time? And really focusing on that growth rather than this is done and, oh, yeah, it was wonderful. It was fantastic. It was amazing. And give them that room to grow. Give them that opportunity to say, yeah, that was okay. Now, do it better.
It was your first try, and now we're going to do another one. So, yeah.
Exactly.
No, I think
also comes back to giving them the time to do it again.
yeah. Yeah. No, I'm trying to think. I'm looking at my notes. There's a couple other things, but I know we're running out on time. Let me see. I'm like old school. I actually take notes on paper, but I read digitally. So it's the mix. So, yeah. No, I think, it just goes, he mentioned about continuous improvement and just continually improving. I think that's our goal as a school, to always have kids continuous improving, our school, our teachers. So if they can't fail anywhere else in school, then we're failing them, So.
I think you can also use the design thinking ideas to sort out social problems. So if the children come in and they've all been having arguments at break, if you take the design thinking strategies and talk, well, what was the problem and how can we empathize with each other, it gives a tool that helps in that situation as well.
Go ahead, Tomas. Sorry.
Sorry?
Oh, I thought you were going to say something because it came up. You came up. I think too, teaching, he didn't mention it here, but I think it goes without saying, is like, I guess, or with the communication piece, but just teaching students to be assertive and have that ability to speak up for themselves, you know, in the learning process of, I'm not understanding this, and can you explain it in a different way, or ask a friend, because a lot of times students will just kind of sit there and not understand anything, and the teacher doesn't know either, so we're not mind readers. So giving them the ability to be assertive in a respectful way. So
teaching them that language of how to ask, how to specify, how to communicate what's going wrong, what is it that you don't understand, so that it's not just I don't get it.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I don't get it. What don't you get? Yeah. But helping them, again, like pinpoint what don't they get, because they might not know. And then it's walking them through that conversation of, okay, let's walk through the process. Where are you getting stuck? Okay, what can we do to change that? How can we improve that? Or what do we need to go back to? So, yeah. I think that I like wish I could sit down with Kurt and like talk to him about his childhood and just how he grew up. And then even now, I was meaning to research his company, that how it's doing, the Sunron. So I want to do that, because I'm sure with him it's doing really well. So.
Or maybe it failed and he's taking the lessons from it and moving on.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I liked how he said, like, he looked at Apple, working at Apple, like his job there was to prepare himself for his next job. I don't know if an employer would like that mentality, but I think his outlook on, like, he's always going to continue to grow and use what he, like, the tools that he got in his next job, is a good way to look at it. So,
yeah, really learning.
Yeah. I think, I mean, that's all I have to talk about, unless you guys have anything to add. But yeah, thank you so much for joining. And then next month we'll talk about chapters 3 and 4. Is that good with everyone?
Yeah.
All right. And then I was kind of tweet messaging with Susie. I think somehow it didn't work, because some of you guys don't have Gmail accounts, but it still worked, correct? Yeah.
What I discovered is that I never got a notification to my email, and I was signed into Google Plus, but didn't get a notification on there. So I did some searching on how to get into my Hangout. Turns out it's a completely different page now, which I didn't know. And there the notification showed up.
Okay. Yeah, because they actually changed it when I was doing research for this. They used to just be able to do like Google Hangout, but now you have to go through YouTube, and then so it was, but anyway. So next time I think more people will be joining us. I actually had like other people say, can I join? And I should have done my research before, because I think you can only have up to 10 people. So we have more than 10 in the group, but I think it'll be like this, kind of people coming when they can and not. But thank you guys so much for participating. I really learned a lot from you. So it was great.
Thank you.
Yeah, and have a great, I guess, rest of your Sunday, or Tomas, you're probably going to bed. And so have a good day tomorrow at school. So
Thank you.
Bye. Bye, guys.
Bye.
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 Bye.